Hi guys, this is Asal. I'm studying for the bar and I wanted to review my notes with you. So today I'm studying contracts, and in this video I'll be talking about the sources of contract law, the definition of contract, the 4 elements of contract, and finally the 2 basic types of contracts. So the first thing you do is you ask yourself, what am I gonna do if I see a contracts question on the bar? So you should be very much prepared for it. First thing you do when you see a contract question on the bar, you ask yourself, what transaction is this? Is it for a sale of goods? Is it for services? Is it for land? What kind of transaction is this? Because if it is a transaction for sale of goods, this is governed under the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code. But if it is a transaction for land and services, then it is the common law. Basically, the second restatement of the contract outlines the rules and principles found in the common law. So the next thing I want to talk about is what are the 4 requirements of contract. The 4 requirements of contract is offer, acceptance, intent, and finally consideration. So what do I mean by an offer acceptance? I'm actually going to go into that just a second. I'm going to read the book for you, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit also more about consideration. But first thing, an offer and acceptance is used to show that there was mutual assent. So what do I mean by mutual assent? I mean that there must be a meeting of the mind. I'm going to go into that a little bit more. Basically, someone says, hey, you want to meet up with me at the mall at 8 o'clock? And then the other person says, yes. And when they show up, there was an offer and acceptance. They meet up with each other and they have lunch and all is good. So the next thing I'll be talking about is actually the definition. I'm going to go over it real quick and then I'm going to read the book for you. So just bear with me. An offer is the willingness to enter into a bargain that justifies another person in understanding that the assent to the bargain is invited. Basically, one person will tell you, I'll pay you $100 to paint my house. And then the other person says, okay, I'll come and I'll paint your house. And once he comes and he paints the house, there was an offer and there was an acceptance and a contract. So what do I mean by an acceptance? An acceptance is an assent to an offer, typically in a form of a promise or a performance. For example, when you tell the painter, come paint my house, and the painter comes and paints your house, he just performed the work. So what I just said was an offer plus acceptance equals to mutual assent and meeting of the minds. The next thing I want to talk about is, what is an intent? An intent is the manifestation that you're going to do or not do something. So basically, the manifestation of a lack of intent to be legally bound will prevent the formation of a contract. The next thing I want to talk about is consideration. So think about that example I just gave with someone saying, I'll pay you $100 for you to come paint my house. So where's the consideration in that? The consideration in that is when the painter actually comes and starts painting the house. And also the other person's consideration is the $100. Next thing I'll be talking about is, what are the 2 types of contracts? So there are 2 types of contracts. There's a bilateral contract and there's a unilateral contract. What is a bilateral contract? This is when the offerer makes a promise and the offeree also makes a promise. So it goes both ways. One person makes a promise, the other person makes a promise, and there's a contract immediately. But with a unilateral contract, the offerer makes a promise and the offeree renders a performance. For example, let's say that I tell you that I'll pay you $100 if you go run across San Francisco Bridge. So there's no contract just yet because you didn't go running on the San Francisco Bridge. But if you start running on the bridge and you make it till the end, then you can come to me and say, hey, I just ran the bridge, give me my $100. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about that. The next thing I want to do is actually talk about this book real quick This is where you find your rules. As you can see, it says 2015, 2016. This is because I bought this book back in 2015, 2016 slash, that's when I first started law school. So it's actually one of the first books I bought when I started law school. So it's getting kind of old, and I can see that my character is changing a little because my handwriting is changing. So I like it. It looks like I'm maturing, and my handwriting is maturing with me. So let me show you the inside of this book. So right here, oops, something fell, but it's all good. So right here, as you can see, it says contracts defined. So as I told you, a contract is a promise or a set of promises for the breach of which the law gives a remedy or the performance of which the law in some way recognizes as a duty. So let me bring it real close so you can see right here. This is your rule. This is how it looks like. So I'm going to go to the next page. On the next page, it talks about mutual assent, and it also talks about parties and the capacity, who has the capacity to enter into a contract. But I'm going to make another video about that. I just want to finish up this video by reading offer and acceptance, and maybe even going into consideration a little bit. We'll see. So in this book right here, let me bring it real close. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read that for you. It says, an offer is a manifestation of willingness to enter into a bargain so made as to justify another person in understanding that his assent to that bargain is invited and will conclude it. So this also goes on into option contracts, preliminary negotiations, invitation of promise or performance, certainty. These are all important rules. Methods of termination of the power of acceptance. This is also a very important rule. I suggest you memorize this. Maybe I should go ahead and read it for you. So methods of termination of the power of acceptance. An offeree's power of acceptance may be terminated by rejection or counteroffer by the offeree, or lapse of time, or revocation by the offerer, or death or incapacity of the offerer or offeree. And also the next thing here is rejection, counteroffers, and the next page it goes to defining acceptance of an offer, and I'm going to go ahead and read that for you. Acceptance of an offer defined. Acceptance by performance and also acceptance by promise. Number one, acceptance of an offer is a manifestation of assent to the terms thereof made by the offeree in a manner invited or required by the offer. So I really suggest you break all this down. What do you mean by the manner invited? Okay, so you really want to define all that when you're on the bar exam, really analyze it and go into it. And then the second one is acceptance by performance requires that at least part of the offer requests be performed or tendered, and includes acceptance by a performance which operates as a return promise. And the third one, acceptance by a promise, requires that the offeree complete every act essential to the making of the promise. And the next thing on here is necessity of acceptance, complying with the terms of offer, purported acceptance which adds qualifications, acceptance of offer which states place, time, or manner of acceptance, and time when acceptance takes place, acceptance by silence or exercise of dominion. And the next chapter, chapter 4, goes into consideration. I didn't want to get into that, but I actually wanted to make my video less than 10 minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and define this for you real quick. Requirement of exchange, types of exchange. To constitute consideration, a performance or a return promise must be bargained for. A performance or return promise is bargained for if it is sought by the promisor in exchange for his promise and is given by the promisee in exchange for the promise. So I actually want to make a video just talking about consideration because there's a lot more into it. And also the second part, as I just said, a performance or a return promise is bargained for if it is sought by the promisor in exchange for his promise and is given by the promisee in exchange for that promise. You really want to have this memorized. And the third part, the performance may consist of an act other than a promise or a forbearance or the creation, modification, or destruction of a legal relation. And fourth, the performance or return promise may be given to the promisor or some other person. It may be given by the promisee or by some other person. And that's pretty much everything there is on this page. And then the next page, I'll talk about performance of a legal duty and then settlements of claim and illusory and alternative promises. So I'm not going to go too much in that. All I wanted to talk about in this video was what is a contract, what does it require. So you really want to remember that a contract requires an offer, acceptance, an intent to be bound, and a consideration. And you really want to define the contract, what it means, go into it, analyze it, and also you really want to know where you're at. Like, what transaction is this? Is this for goods, UCC, or is it for land and services, the common law? So you want to also look at that. That's pretty much everything I wanted to say in this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Good luck studying and keep safe and healthy.